As Israel keeps up its attacks on Lebanon despite a ceasefire, the U.S. has sanctioned 9 people, including 2 Lebanese military officers accused of links to Hezbollah. It comes while Washington brokers more talks between Lebanese and Israeli officials. So why these sanctions now? This is Inside Story. Hey there, I'm Scott McLean. There's been mixed reaction in Lebanon to U.S. sanctions against 9 people in the country. Washington accuses them of hindering the disarmament of Hezbollah, a critical U.S. and Israeli demand. The Iranian-backed group, which is a powerful political and military force in Lebanon, calls the sanctions a badge of honor. Significantly, 2 Lebanese military officers are on the list. One is accused of sharing intelligence with Hezbollah. The Lebanese army says it had no advance notice and issued a statement reaffirming its independence and loyalty to the state. And despite last month's U.S. brokered ceasefire, Israel continues to attack Lebanon, killing more than 3,000 people since March. Now, the sanctions come as Washington is driving talks between Israeli and Lebanese officials, a process that does not include Hezbollah. So why is the U.S. taking this action now, and what's the significance? We'll discuss this with our guest shortly, but first, this report from Alexandra Byers.
Despite a U.S. brokered ceasefire in Lebanon, Israeli airstrikes every night and every day continue to pummel towns across the south. At least 6 people killed in separate attacks on Thursday alone. Bodies being pulled from the rubble, and funerals like this one, where an entire family was laid to rest. 5 children killed, the youngest, Mohammed, just 18 months old.
These children, this family was killed during what is supposed to be a ceasefire. The Lebanese authorities who are engaging in talks with Israel are responsible for this.
Israeli attacks have killed at least 3,000 people in Lebanon in the past 3 months, more than 400 since the ceasefire took effect in April. The U.S. has been brokering peace talks between Israel and the Lebanese government, the first direct negotiations between the two sides in decades. Political talks are expected to resume at the beginning of June, and in just a week, military delegations are due to meet at the Pentagon. But Washington has just upped the pressure, announcing sanctions on 9 people it accuses of supporting Hezbollah to, quote, undermine Lebanon's sovereignty, obstructing the peace process, and impeding the disarmament of Hezbollah. They include 4 Hezbollah members, associated security officials, and an Iranian diplomat. But in a rare move, the U.S. also sanctioned 2 officers from the Lebanese army and general security, accusing them of sharing important intelligence with Hezbollah over the past year.
What this is saying is that if you're in politics, business, or the security services, and you have been aiding Hezbollah and undermining the sovereignty of the Lebanese government, to think twice. There will be real consequences. We're focused on creating the space for those good faith conversations between the government of Israel and government of Lebanon. And what we've seen from Hezbollah is a direct effort to derail those conversations, including threats within Lebanon, including attacks against Israel.
Hezbollah has called the sanctions a badge of honor and accused the U.S. of intimidation ahead of the next round of talks. The group has condemned the Lebanese government's decision to engage with Israel, which has spurred mixed feelings across Lebanon, a country divided, and now with its military under even more direct U.S. political pressure. Alexandra Byers, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
All right, let's bring in our guests now. In Beirut, David Wood, a senior Lebanon analyst at the International Crisis Group. In Dayton, Ohio, Randa, Middle East Program Director at the Stimson Center. And in Paris, Elijah Magnier, a specialist in Middle East wars and regional military dynamics. Thank you all for being on the program here. David, we'll start with you. The fact that the U.S. State Department is not just going after Hezbollah here, but also members of state institutions, the Lebanese military, the General Security Directorate, which oversees borders here. What is the message that they're trying to send, you think?
So I think the message is very clear. And the United States, obviously in coordination with Israel, is using this latest announcement of sanctions as a way to further turn up the heat on the Lebanese state to take firmer action on Hezbollah. So it is true that the Lebanese president, when he was elected at the start of 2025, and also the new Prime Minister of Lebanon, committed to implementing a state monopoly over arms. And of course, that includes the disarmament of Hezbollah. However, up until now, Lebanon's political leaders have been cautious and tried to attract Hezbollah's compliance and cooperation with disarmament rather than resorting to force and, in particular, deploying potentially the Lebanese army against Hezbollah to force it to surrender its weapons. Now, as this situation has developed, we've seen that the US has now taken, as far as I'm aware, an unprecedented step of sanctioning not just Hezbollah officials or officials associated with Harakat Amal, the main ally of Hezbollah within the Lebanese political system, but also sanctioning Lebanese security officers who are in active service. And while the US has justified this as saying that these particular officers are actually, their ultimate allegiance lies with Hezbollah and not with the Lebanese state, it has two key problems. One is that targeted individual sanctions don't often work. They have a pretty low success rate in terms of actually changing the behavior of people sanctioned. And the other is that this is the latest in a series of signals showing that the pressure campaign of the United States and Israel on the Lebanese state actually undermines its credibility. And now in this latest step, we have the US sanctioning active security officials who are Lebanese public officials and questioning their loyalty to the Lebanese state project.
Randa, do you agree with what David just said there? And what should we make of the timing here, given that the Israeli and Lebanese military representatives are supposed to meet in Washington in just a few days from now?
I mean, the timing definitely is a message here, just ahead of this meeting on May 29. But let me contextualize this decision. The names of these officers have been on a list of potential sanctions for some time now. The LAF commander, during his February visit to DC, was given a list of names, and that predates the war between Israel war on Lebanon. And among these names, names of officers who are known to be actively cooperating with Hezbollah. And one of the names on that list was Colonel Hamadi. And at the time, the LAF commander, the presidents have decided not to act on the list. And he was asked, basically, the LAF commander during his meetings in DC, to remove these officers. And at the time, they did not act on it. And so there was plenty of warning. And the list includes other names. I heard of maybe 2 or 3 other names. And I think their names will come up soon in future designation. But the timing, why DC decided to move ahead with this has to do with, again, what David said, upping the ante on the Lebanese government, pushing it to take more forceful action against Hezbollah, and a sort of coercive influence on the Lebanese government ahead of the talks on May 29. This designation is going to put the president, particularly, who is the official in Lebanon leading the direct negotiation between Israel and Lebanon, is going to put him in a bind on 2 levels. On inside Lebanon, there is already accusation by good segments of the society. The Lebanese society is divided on the issue of direct negotiation with Israel. There is a suspicion that he is working according to dictates from the United States and Israel because of the cooperation between the 2 sides in this war. Now, that's on one hand. So that's going to constrict his room for maneuvering on the negotiation domestically. Sure. On the other hand, the Lebanese army needs and relies on U.S. funding for military training, and so this designation is going to put at risk, at further risk, potential funding, U.S. funding for the Lebanese army for training, hardware, whatever.
Which, of course, would be very significant because the U.S. and Israel are asking the Lebanese armed forces to be the ones to disarm Hezbollah. Elijah, I want to bring you in because the Lebanese military came out with a statement essentially denying that these security personnel passed anything onto Hezbollah. The statement said that the loyalty of military personnel is solely to the military institution and to the nation. I mean, this is a pretty serious accusation that's being made by the U.S. State Department here. Shouldn't the Lebanese military at least want to look into it?
It's a fair question. If we look at the history of the Lebanese army and we take the very recent president, Joseph Aoun, who was in the picture that you just showed a minute ago, he was a chief of staff. And he was the first to collaborate with Hezbollah as a de facto non-state actor armed and operating in the south of Lebanon. In fact, nothing works in Lebanon without a cooperation and agreement among all the different sects, particularly those who can make a difference on the ground. Therefore, this is not new for the Lebanese army to cooperate and coordinate with Hezbollah. That's one. Two, the timing is extremely important. The former chief of staff who became the president said that he is willing to go to meet Benjamin Netanyahu without mentioning him. He said, I'm ready to do anything and do everything that is required of me. That was at the first beginning when he said Donald Trump was his friend after receiving the first contact through the phone. So that was a message that sent a wave among one sect that represent more than a third in the country that actually it is going against the current. If we look at the identity of these officers, they are Shia. And we look at Hezbollah as a Shia organization. The Amal movement is against the Shia organization. So there is a kind of misunderstanding by the US administration thinking that they can actually win or allow Israel to win where Israel is not capable of defeating, eliminating Hezbollah in the south of Lebanon. And the Israeli did not really give a chance to the Lebanese president when he managed to secure the south of the Litani River clean from Hezbollah and all the weapons and offer it to Lebanon for the stability. But the Israeli rejected the cooperation when the US envoy Thomas Barak said actually the Israelis no longer recognize the borders. Therefore, this act today is really kind of declaring the Shia as an entity that is need to be put under control and pushing these officers and all those who are in the army to think that can be targeted and most probably produce a counter effect and to rally around Hezbollah and Amal rather than against it.
Yeah.
And the biggest misunderstanding of the US administration is not new. During Joe Biden, we had Amos Hochstein who came and scolded the US embassy and the Lebanese who thought they can really isolate Hezbollah and the Shia from the parliament and government, but his clever ways stopped it. Today, we have a new administration saying that, like the US ambassador in Lebanon, those who do not agree with this path of peace with Israel can leave. And he's talking about more than 30 to 40% of the population, which fit with Mike Pompeo when he was foreign minister, saying Hezbollah needs to be removed from Lebanon. We're talking about embedded sovereignty within the society.
Sure.
But not as a group of people that one can take and put and relocate somewhere else.
Sure. You make a lot of points in there. You also mentioned the Amal movement. Some of these sanctions are targeting people within the Amal movement, which is the other Shia political party that the Lebanese speaker belongs to. The other Shia political party in Lebanon, of course, is Hezbollah. And I wonder, David, whether you think that going after the Amal movement with these sanctions is maybe sending a message to the Lebanese speaker, who is against direct talks between Lebanon and Israel, to get with the program, to get on board and to start supporting this so that these talks have a bit more legitimacy within the country, because all of the major sects within Lebanon will be represented.
Absolutely. And there has long been discussion about how the United States might try to use sanctions against Speaker Berre as a way to get him to change his behavior. And perhaps by sanctioning members of the Harakat Amal, this is a way to, again, re-enliven that threat towards the speaker and potentially make him more supportive of negotiations, and more generally to provide a political alternative to Hezbollah for the Shia community rather than continuing to move in lockstep. The issue, of course, is that, again, I mean, sanctions have a pretty low success rate in changing behavior. And even the threat of sanctions, which has loomed over Speaker Berre for years now, has ultimately not really changed his behavior. So when this latest war broke out on the 2nd of March, his ministers in the government supported the government's decision to ban Hezbollah's military wing. But as you've just mentioned, we're 2 months and a bit on from then. And Harakat Amal is supporting Hezbollah's stance, which is that any negotiations with Israel should be indirect and not direct. So there's another problem here as well, which is that something that Elijah mentioned, which I think is worth considering, is that trying to create a cleavage between Hezbollah and Harakat Amal risks feeding into this perception which exists for some Lebanese Shia, which is that this war is not just a war of Israel on Hezbollah, but a war of Israel on the Shia community in general, with the backing of the United States. So if the United States proceeds down this path of continuing to apply pressure on the Shia community, and perhaps in particular, one of its most prominent leaders, Nabi Berri, then this does run the risk of fueling that counter-narrative that it's not just Hezbollah that's under threat in this ongoing war, but the Shia community at large. And this is especially sensitive when hundreds of thousands of Shia are currently displaced and under the threat of being displaced even further and having no shelter available at all.
Of course, and I want to ask you guys about the potential split that this could cause within the country, within the military institutions. But I just want to go back for a second to Randa's point earlier, which was that, look, if the U.S., through these sanctions, is effectively saying that Hezbollah is within these state institutions, well, they may look at no longer funding those state institutions like the Lebanese armed forces. And I just want to read you what Marco Rubio said about the U.S.'s plan for Lebanon last month. He said that, look, the ultimate answer, both sides agree, is a Lebanese armed forces with the capability to go after and disarm and dismantle Hezbollah inside their country. And that's what we're working toward establishing, is a system that actually works where vetted units within the Lebanese armed forces have the training, the equipment, and the capability to go after elements of Hezbollah and dismantle them so Israel doesn't have to do it. So my question to you, Randa, is that realistic, to train specifically units within the Lebanese armed forces to go after and disarm Hezbollah, or is this pie in the sky?
I mean, first, let me say something about Berre's position. His message to the Americans is, I'm not going to endorse publicly the direct negotiation between Israel and Lebanon, but I'm not going to also block them or oppose them. So I think his position is nuanced in terms of the direct negotiations. And he's going to see what they will amount to. And so far, they have failed at delivering the ceasefire that the Lebanese want. In terms of this unit within the Lebanese army to go after Hezbollah, I think the Americans have tried this kind of approach in the past, and it fails. It's not going to work. And it's a wrong assumption. Not every Shia military officer is pro-Hezbollah. But I think, as the speakers said, today the Shia community feels under threat as a community. And this move is going to reinforce this feeling. And so if you look at one of the most recent public opinion polls of Lebanese vis-a-vis a number of issues, including direct negotiation, including whether the Lebanese president and the prime minister are doing a good job, what comes across this poll is this feeling of a majority mood within the Shia community of being targeted, of the direct negotiation being against them and threatening their future. And so I think that's going to put a lot of pressure on the Lebanese president again, and the Lebanese head and the head of and the commander of the Lebanese army, about this kind of next move that the Americans want to proceed with. Because in my opinion, that's a recipe for a major break inside the Lebanese army. And we have seen that happen in the past during the Lebanese civil war. It did not end well for Lebanon. And I think we might be seeing a repeat of that scenario, but along different sectarian lines this time.
Interesting. Elijah, Marco Rubio's quote that I just read you there sort of implies that they don't trust the Lebanese army as a whole. And I just wonder, is it naive to think that there aren't sections of the Lebanese army that maybe are more loyal to Hezbollah or to their sect than they are to the state as a whole?
Marco Rubio is not the military and is not consulting the military. Militarily speaking, no one can operate in a hostile environment. Hezbollah would die in 24 hours if the population is against it.
But that's not what I'm asking. I'm just asking whether in the Lebanese military, if there's people who maybe are more loyal to sect than to the state. Go ahead.
I'm coming to that.
Please.
So sending a specific unit in the Lebanese army to operate against Hezbollah in the south of Lebanon or in the suburb of Beirut or in the Bekaa Valley, it's a suicide mission because it will be operating in a very hostile environment, particularly when the objective is stated as such. Therefore, the mere idea to send the unit, it means that he doesn't really understand how the Lebanese army functions, that the chief of staff will never agree on such an idea because he is a professional military and he knows where this is going. And even the president is a professional military and he knows that this is not feasible. Therefore, ideas just trying to be digested in Washington cannot be applied on the ground in Lebanon. These are fantasies and ideas thrown just in the air to see if someone can pick up these ideas and perhaps materialize them with the help of supporters or anti-Hezbollah people. But at the end of the day, there is an institution that needs to last for all of Lebanon. And the Lebanese army will not survive without being completely split if the Americans want to impose a section of the Lebanese army, and even if they are insinuating a section that they are already training, which are the special forces that are linked to the Lebanese army intelligence services that operate within the army under the direct command of the chief of staff. The chief of staff is not going to agree to give these forces in the hand of an American project in Lebanon.
David, do you agree that splitting the military in this way risks also splitting it along sectarian lines?
Well, absolutely. And in fact, what it really does, this kind of plan to create special units inside the army to go after Hezbollah, is almost realizes the fear of fragmentation ahead of the fact. So just to remind your viewers, I mean, the reason that the president and the political leadership in general is so worried about deploying the Lebanese army to confront Hezbollah is that, as Randa mentioned before, the several times during the civil war, the Lebanese army split along sectarian lines. So this is a live risk that the President Joseph Aoun, who's the former commander of the army, is in a uniquely good position to understand the relative strength of the army, which he commanded, and Hezbollah, which in his capacity as the army commander, he worked alongside for many years. So he knows perhaps better than anybody the pros and cons of making that decision. But ultimately, he came to power on the promise of implementing a state monopoly over arms. There was this recent government decision to ban Hezbollah's military wing. So ultimately, it's open for the Lebanese to demand of their leaders that they take firmer action on disarming Hezbollah. But in my view, at least, I would say that that's a decision for the Lebanese people to make. And it's not one that should be made under duress from external powers. obviously in this case, the United States, in coordination with Israel.
Randa, I want to also ask about these talks coming up and what might ultimately stop the fighting in southern Lebanon and get the Israelis to withdraw or at least stop striking. Do you think that there can be a peace deal between the United States and Iran that doesn't also include Lebanon? Or do you think that the Iranians may go along with a deal that allows the fighting to continue there?
Yes, I think the Iranian may go along with a deal that will allow the fighting to go on. But the problem is going to be, if that's the case, that's going to be putting, again, the Lebanese president, who is the official responsible for the direct negotiations between Lebanon and Israel, in a very tough position domestically, especially given the fact that what looks like now, Iran is going to emerge the winner of this fight with the United States if the reports about a potential letter of intent to be signed, extension of the ceasefire for the next 30 days. We all know that Trump is not going to go for this war that's going to decapitate the Iranian regime, cause the kind of regime collapse that Israeli allies desire. So if that's where the case and Iran emerge stronger and more powerful and richer because of the tolls that they're going to be exacting going forward, that's going to have repercussion inside Lebanon in terms of Hezbollah's positioning within the domestic political structure. And especially given the fact that I don't think these negotiations, whether the military ones between the United States and Lebanon or the political ones, are going to yield right now any kind of maneuvering room or decrease in the operational tempo of the Israeli basically actions, military actions in south of Lebanon. This is an election year for Mr. Netanyahu. The war on Lebanon is supported by a great majority of the Israeli society, and he's not going to embark on any kind of action that will yield the kind of ceasefire that the Lebanese government and especially the president needs in order to keep this maneuvering room to proceed with these negotiations.
All right. It is a fascinating discussion. I certainly wish we had more time. We appreciate you all being here. That's David Wood, Randa Saleem, and Elijah Magnier. And thank you for watching as well. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on X. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. For now, that's it for me, Scott McLean, and the entire team here in Doha. Al Jazeera's coverage continues in a moment. Stay tuned. See ya.